Hey everybody, it's H3 Bomb, and I am back. I am stoked to be doing this video. It happened. And I know I posted my last video after this happened, but hey, I decided to do a video to offer my take on some of the recent discussions ever since the news came out. I am elated. I feel blessed, and I feel that this is an answer to so many prayers. Many people prayed hard, fervent prayers for this to happen. Many people worked tirelessly for this to happen. And I truly believe, and I'm convinced, that all the right people were put in all the right places for this to occur. But let me talk a little bit about my history. This year, in my local county, I ran for Board of Education. There were 4 seats open, 9 candidates. I got 5th place, didn't make it, unfortunately. As John Cooper of Skillet would say, he gave me the sads. But I got over it pretty quick. I have other pursuits, one of which is this podcast. On the last video, I mentioned the name Lion Tribe. LION is an acronym. It stands for Liberating of Children. Investigating, looking into news, looking into research, information that's been dug up. Organizing, grouping together with like-minded individuals, networking, connecting with the right people, the right politicians to get things done and protect our children. N stands for negating. Negating the lunacy, the perversion, the indoctrination that's targeting the kids. As I said in the last video, I want all of us to be bold as lions. Oh, I didn't introduce my ladies. So, these are my nuns. Earlier in my race for Board of Education, I and 3 other conservative candidates were invited onto Paramount Tactical Solutions. It's a podcast done by a local fellow who owns quite a bit of firearms. Just so happened to be that the place where he films many of his videos, it had a wall where we sat in front of, and the wall had a bunch of guns, multiple firearms and accessories. And wouldn't you know it, running for Board of Education and sitting in front of guns, I was told that carries negative connotations, negative imagery. People assume that I support guns or something. Somehow, I survived that encounter, and so did everybody else in that room that night. Because, evidently, those guns didn't want to kill people. It caused a little bit of a stir in my community. Some people took screenshots of the imagery and of me and the others, and they ended up interviewing us again on the radio because of that. So I decided that to decrease any sort of controversy on my own personal podcast, I would include my own wall of nuns instead of wall of guns. Because who could be offended by nuns? Who? Alright, enough kidding around. Let me get to the serious business. I'm going to go ahead and read this article in my local paper. Alright, Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. Alright, the subtitle here. States can ban abortion. Women's constitutional protections stripped away. You can already tell this is written by a woke leftist. This is written actually by Mark Sherman of Associated Press. Ooh. This should be good. Washington. The Supreme Court on Friday stripped away women's constitutional protections. That's a lie. There's no constitutional protection to murder your child. Constitutional protections for abortion, a fundamental and deeply personal change for Americans' lives after nearly a half-century under Roe v. Wade. The court's overturning of the landmark court ruling is likely to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. I don't see how that's a bad thing. The ruling, unthinkable just a few years ago, was the culmination of decades of efforts by abortion opponents, made possible by an emboldened right side of the court, fortified by 3 appointees of former President Donald Trump. Thank you, 45. Both sides predicted the fight over abortion would continue in state capitals, in Washington, and at the ballot box. Justice Clarence Thomas, part of Friday's majority, urged colleagues to overturn other high court rulings protecting same-sex marriage, gay sex, and the use of contraceptives. Now, in my last video, I made the bold claim that I didn't think those 3 things were going to be under attack anytime soon, or the special perceived rights that are actually not in the Constitution for same-sex marriage and transgenderism, because that's really what a lot of the other articles are saying. Well, in a way I was right, but I will concede that I didn't expect one of the justices to bring those up. I didn't actually read his exact wording, at least not yet, but I do have the actual 213-page document. I think it's how many pages it is. I've kind of skimmed through like the first 70-some pages, was reading some of the quotes from the justices. It's really cool. I love it. But he's the only one that mentioned those 3 things. Those other subjects that are on prior cases in which abortion is mentioned. Let me continue the article. Pregnant women considering abortions already had been dealing with a near-complete ban in Oklahoma and a prohibition after roughly 6 weeks in Texas. Clinics in at least 8 other states, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Kentucky, Missouri, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and West Virginia, stopped performing abortions after Friday's decision. Again, I don't see how that's a bad thing. Abortion foes cheered the ruling, but abortion rights supporters, including President Joe Biden, expressed dismay and pledged to fight to restore the rights. Now remember, abortion is a euphemism for baby murder. So President Joe Biden wants to restore the pretend right to kill your child. It's a sad day for the court and for the country, Biden said at the White House. He urged voters to make it a defining issue in the November elections, declaring this decision must not be the final word. Of course, it's going to try to stoke up a lot of leftist voters, but I have another subject that we're going to talk about where it should get some attention on the right and get them out to vote in November. All right, outside the White House, Ansley Cole, a college student from Atlanta, said she was scared because what are they going to come after next? The next election cycle is going to be brutal, like it's terrifying. And if they're going to do this, again, what's next? Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of SBA Pro-Life America, agreed about the political stakes. We are ready to go on offense for life in every single one of those legislative bodies. In each state house and the White House, Dannenfelser said in a statement. I agree with you. It's time to go on offense. Let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Trump praised the ruling, telling Fox News that it will work out for everybody. I also heard that Trump gave credit to God for this. The decision is expected to disproportionately affect minority women who already face limited access to health care, according to statistics analyzed by the Associated Press. There they go, mentioning minority women, because as everybody knows, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. Planned Parenthood was based on racism, and people who are honest with themselves admit that, even people on the left. It also puts the court at odds with a majority of Americans who favored preserving Roe, according to opinion polls. Now, I don't know which polls they were taken, but lots of people in the circles that I run, they weren't in favor of preserving Roe. Surveys conducted by the Associated Press, NORC, Center for Public Affairs Research, and others have shown a majority in favor of abortion. Well, if I would have just kept reading the article, it would have told me what poll they took. All right, so yeah, it says the majority in favor of abortion being legal in all or most circumstances. Abortion on demand. That's just sick. I'm going to be honest. But many also support restrictions, especially later in pregnancy. Surveys consistently show that about 1 in 10 Americans want abortion to be illegal in all cases. The ruling came more than a month after the stunning leak of a draft opinion by Justice Samuel Alito indicating the court was prepared to take this momentous step. Alito, in the final opinion issued Friday, wrote that Roe and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the 1992 decision that reaffirmed the right to murder your child, were wrong, had to be overturned. We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Now he's quoting from the ruling. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives, Alito wrote, in an opinion that was very similar to the leaked draft. To people who are pro-choice, some of you are screaming and crying and foaming at the mouth for nothing. I'm going to reread this quote from Judge Alito. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives. The court is giving more power back to the people. So, if you really want to fight for your abortions that bad, you have more power to do so now. So please stop burning down cities. Please stop burning down the care pregnancy centers. Go home. All right. Joining Alito were Thomas and Justices Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett. The latter 3 justices are Trump appointees. Thomas first voted to overrule Roe 30 years ago. 4 justices would have left Roe and Casey in place. The vote was 6-3 to uphold the Mississippi law, but Chief Justice John Roberts didn't rejoin his conservative colleagues in overturning Roe. He wrote that there was no need to overturn the broad precedents to rule in Mississippi's favor. Justices Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, the diminished liberal wing of the court, were in dissent. With sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. They wrote this, warning that abortion opponents now could pursue a nationwide ban from the moment of conception and without exceptions for rape and incest. That's the end of the article. Now, from my smart alecky comments, from my hot take on this, you can probably gather what I think about that article and the dissenting opinions of the 3 judges that disagreed with the ruling. Let me just say, the judges who voted to overturn Roe v. Wade, base for life! Hope you like that. All right. Moving on. Because that's what I do. Pro-lifers, anti-abortion crowd. I want to read an article from somebody who is pro-choice and much more honest than many pro-choicers are. And so I do have to give props to this author for at least being honest, more honest about what abortion is than many others do. But what I'm about to read, it's going to sound pretty sick. So this is an article in thenation.com. So this is an article I found on thenation.com. It's an article by Sophie Lewis, and it's titled, "Abortion Involves Killing, and That's Okay." This was written on, or published on, June 22nd. In 2019, I published a kind of manifesto, Full Surrogacy Now, whose open line is, "It is a wonder we let fetuses inside us." The opening pages are entirely given over to my extended paean to the process of gestating in all its shockingly grisly biology, its everyday sublimity. Whereas, in other species, a female can often discard or expel a pregnancy at will, in our species, a hyper-invasive placenta puts the gestator. So we're reducing women to being called objects, being called things that are not women. They just want to call them incubators, gestators. This is just, that's a form of projection. I mean, she's calling women gestators. So it puts the gestator at risk of lethal hemorrhage. Locked down, our body becomes a daredevil participant in a wrestling match or similar extreme sport. We cannot easily quit. From this starting point, I make a case for rethinking human gestation as real and currently often deadly, dangerous labor, deserving of maximal support. I'm going to pause real quick and just offer a few thoughts. So what this author is doing at the beginning of her article is pretty much diminishing what pregnancy actually is, and she's comparing it to difficult labor that women are forced into. Oh, it's so grisly. Now, of course, pregnancy from first, second, third trimester, it's not always pretty. I understand that. I have a few kids. But my wife was amazing through all of it. The fact that this woman compares pregnancy and carrying a child inside of a person, she compares it to all this nasty and just so tough. Ugh. Oh. Can you imagine forcing women to go through that? How can you expect women to be strong enough to go through that stuff? But women are resilient, I'll tell you that. At least in my opinion, Sophie. Okay, let me continue. The controversial part is that a key correlate of viewing gestating as labor is that forcing someone to gestate against their will is forced labor. Ooh, so she's comparing it to slavery. Furthermore, if the labor of pregnancy is productive of life, then interrupting that labor is, logically speaking, productive of death. Hey, she's being honest. So she's being honest that something is dying. Something is alive in there and something is dying. Rather than shy away from this, I believe we should embrace it as part of an effort to give gestating the respect it deserves. Like I said, I did want to offer props to this girl for being more honest than most pro-choicers that I've talked to in the past. All right, later on, I'm not going to read her whole article, but later on in the article, closer to the end, she says, quote, "What would it mean to acknowledge that a death is involved in an abortion? Above all, it would allow for a fairer fight against the proponents of forced gestating. When pro-life forces agitate against feticide, on the basis that it is killing, pro-abortion feminists should be able to acknowledge without shame that yes, of course it is." Now, I appreciate Sophie's willingness to offer a fair fight when discussing abortion and pro-life causes. But the fact that she's willing to talk about this, write about this with such pizzazz, she seems a little bit excited to be admitting that it is indeed killing. It's taking of a life. It's kind of disturbing, if you ask me. And I honestly want more pro-choicers to be this honest, because it really it doesn't accomplish what they think it accomplishes. This honesty gives us a little bit of insight into what some pro-choicers are actually thinking. All right? So, anyways, let me continue. When we withdraw from gestating, we stop the life of the product of our gestational labor. Oh, let me pause again. So, at one point in the article, she does go almost as far as calling the gestational product inside of a woman a person. She calls it proto-person, which, if you look up what proto means, it pretty much means first type of. So first type of person. So it's the first version of a person. She's accidentally, if it may be, or I don't know, she's admitting it's a person. All right, and it's a good thing we do too, for otherwise the world would sag under the weight of forced life. That's a bold-faced lie. Overpopulation, all that scare tactic crap, to use that to enforce and encourage abortion, that's a lie. It is a hard pill to swallow for a misogynist society, sentimentally attached to its ideology of patriarchal motherhood. Ooh. But the truth is that gestators should get to decide which bodies to give form to. Oh, gestators. Somebody tell Sophie that a gestator is a woman. Only women can gestate. Only women can give birth. But, so she's saying, women should get to decide which bodies to give form to. So basically she's saying women should be able to play God. This choosing is our prerogative. A desire not to be pregnant is sufficient reason in and of itself to terminate a gestatee. Just kick them on out, right, Sophie? When we force anti-abortionists to disagree explicitly with this, we bring their logic of female subordination into the open. Ooh, yes, because all men, by protecting unborn life, it just automatically means they want women subservient. Oh my goodness. Sophie, I think you got a few screws loose, honey. Those with uteruses must serve patiently as the vessels through which life passes. She actually thinks that pro-lifers think this way. This is kind of insane. We lay bare the calculus at the heart of their worldview, which they only sometimes spell out in so many words, as does the Mississippi pro-life leader Barbara Beaver. Mothers, she's quoting Barbara Beaver here, mothers should die for their babies, not the other way around. So if he has a problem with that quote, can anybody disagree with that quote? Anybody with an adult, fully formed logic, I can't even think of the right words. This quote is from This quote from Barbara Beavers says, mothers should die for their babies, not the other way around. How anybody could disagree with that quote is pretty much beyond me. Mothers should die for their babies, not the other way around. If you replaced fathers in that sentence, fathers should die for their babies, not the other way around. That's true as well. I have no disagreement with that statement. Anybody who thinks otherwise, I don't know what to tell you. All right. I'm done talking about this article. That's all I'm going to quote on it. Let me talk about a really awesome woman in my life. The other day, I was bragging a little bit about my wife. Her name's Stacy. So I was just talking about the fact that knowing that my wife is pro-life, it's like I consider her like a million times hotter. I mean, yeah, she's got the looks. Yeah, she's got the personality. But the fact that she values human life, unborn human life, as much as she does, that's a blessing in and of itself. I mean, this woman is amazing. I know she's not going to like me bragging about her so much, but I'm going to do it anyways. So, my wife and I have had this discussion numerous times. And not only is my wife willing to give birth to every child that she becomes pregnant with, she is willing to die so that her child can live. She has made a point to tell me more than once that if it ever comes to it and I have to make the choice between saving the baby and saving her, if I don't choose the baby and the baby dies and the doctors and nurses save her, she says she doesn't know how she could even live with me for the rest of our lives together, because she would probably hold that against me. In my opinion, that's a normal and logical way of thinking about human life, about valuing innocency, and about valuing the life of those who are less capable of defending themselves. If the situation were flipped, I'm going to come up with a fake scenario here. I'm going to reach a little bit. A lot of people come up with the burning building example, so I'll just use that. If a building is burning and I'm stuck inside with my child, with one of my children, and there is a person that has the chance to save only one, if that person saves me over my child, I am far more capable of saving myself than my child is. I'm stronger, I'm taller, I can reach things, I can move things, I have bigger lung capacity. I have much more of a chance to save myself than my own kid does. If a person saves me over my kid, I would be livid. I would be thankful for being alive. But that would be devastating to me, to go on in life knowing that my child could have lived, but I'm the one that got saved instead. So I can fully understand why my wife is so committed to giving birth to a child that she's willing to lay down her own life for her own child that she's never even gotten to see. See, that's the problem that I have with the pro-choice stance, with especially the doctors and the nurses who carry out these procedures. These so-called medical professionals who take innocent life in the womb. They should know better. A lot of them, they're deceiving women and families who support this stuff. Some of the monstrous, weak, cowardly men who coerce their women into aborting. It's ridiculous. Sorry I'm getting so serious all of a sudden, but I care about children. And I want everybody to care about children as deeply as I do. Innocent life deserves protecting. Humans are made in the image of God Almighty. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to talk about God from time to time. Can't help it. I know what it's like to lose a child. But be a little bit more candid right now. My ex-wife, who was pregnant with my very first child, miscarried. And my third child, which was my second born, died at 17 months. I experienced the pain of losing a child that I had never met, and the pain of losing a child that I got to hold in my hands and hear his voice, look into his eyes, play with that kid. His name was Gabriel. My life will never be the same after I lost him, but I tell you what, that pain is the same. I wept when my first wife miscarried my child, our child. And I wept when I lost my 17-month-old. Sure, it was more devastating because I got to know my other one a lot more. But the abortion industry is so evil because they purposefully disconnect women from the children in their womb. They do it because they don't want women to realize that the value of what's inside their womb. They do it because they want women to think of the thing inside their womb as a blob, a clump of cells, to devalue it, to think of it as a strange, foreign thing, because it makes it easier to dispense of, to toss it in the garbage, or to sell for parts. I'm tired of being this. I've been too quiet about this subject. I've done things to help the pro-life cause, but I haven't been as vocal as I could have been. And I intend to make up for that. I'm going to change the subject so I can get out of my emotions, okay? I apologize for going so deep there. I'm going to change course like I did on the last episode, though. So, I am fully committed to also protecting born life. I hope, even if you disagree with me on some abortion things, that you can agree with me on protecting kids from the woke indoctrination in the public school systems. On June 23rd, the United States Department of Education released proposed Title IX regulations changes. And they are inviting public comment. On June 23rd, 2022, the United States Department of Education releases proposed changes to Title IX regulations and it invites public comment. So, after I read some of the quotes from this article from the Department of Education, because of the fact that they are inviting public comment, I highly encourage you, and I intend to, publicly comment on these proposed changes. So it leaves the contact number for the press office. You can contact 202-401-1576. You can go to press@ed.gov. All right, to quote from the article, it says, "Today, in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Title IX, the landmark civil rights law that has opened doors for generations of women and girls." That's a good thing. The United States Department of Education released for public comment proposed changes to the regulations that help elementary and secondary schools and colleges and universities implement this vital legislation. Sorry, thought I lost it for a second. The proposed amendments will restore crucial protections for students who are victims of sexual harassment, assault, and sex-based discrimination. A critical safety net for survivors that was weakened under previous regulations. The proposed regulations will advance educational equity. Equity is a fancy word. A lot of times people try to pass that off as meaning equality. It doesn't. Equity just means equal outcomes, which is, on this earth, it is impossible to achieve equal outcomes unless everybody is all buried in the same grave. Anyways, the proposed regulations will advance educational equity and opportunity for women and girls. They're emphasizing women and girls, which is nice because that's what Title IX was designed to do. From my understanding, will give them this opportunity across the country to ensure that every student in America from kindergarten through a doctorate degree can achieve her dreams. Over the last 50 years, Title IX has paved the way for millions of girls and women to access equal opportunity in our nation's schools. Equal opportunity is good. That's a good thing. I fully support all that. I fully support protecting women from harassment. I fully support protecting girls from sex-based discrimination. So, let me get back to it. To access to equal opportunity in our nation's schools and has been instrumental in combating sexual assault and sexual violence in educational settings, said U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. As we celebrate the 50th anniversary of this landmark law, our proposed changes will allow us to continue that progress to ensure all our nation's students, no matter where they live, who they are, or whom they love. This is where it gets into the not so protective parts for women and girls can learn, grow, and thrive in school. You'll see what I mean as I keep reading. We welcome public comment on these critical regulations so we can further the Biden-Harris administration's mission of creating educational environments free from sex discrimination and sexual violence. The proposed regulations will advance Title IX's goal of ensuring that no person experiences sex discrimination, sex-based harassment, or sexual violence in education. It's a lot of words. Kind of wish they defined it in the article, but I don't know if they do, and I think they do in the actual proposal. Would be helpful to know them. In their long proposals that they write out, I think the one for this is like 700 and some pages. They're probably well aware that the average American's not going to read all that, and so it seems like they purposely leave out definitions in these shorter articles. All right, sorry. Let me continue again. So, as the Supreme Court wrote in Bostock versus Clayton County, 1731. This is in 2020. It is impossible to discriminate against a person on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity without discriminating against that individual based on sex. I call baloney on that. Just my opinion. But I call baloney on that for quite a few reasons. Sex is an innate characteristic. Sexual orientation or gender identity is not innate. Those are choices. Nobody's born with it. Anybody who tries to argue that and they bring up this pseudoscience, it's garbage. All right. Here's my take. If you discriminate against somebody based on their sexual orientation, and by discriminate I mean treat them poorly, give favors to people who are straight versus people who are gay or lesbian. Let's say you're a coworker. Your coworker is lesbian, and your other coworker is straight, and the one who's straight, you offer them way more time and energy to help with their tasks at the end of the day, at the end of the shift after you've caught up. But the lesbian coworker who's also asking, you don't show them any attention. You're probably discriminating. You're probably biased against it. That's wrong. But you're not discriminating against the person's sex. The person is discriminating against a sexual preference, sexual orientation. Same thing applies if the person's transgender. All right. Let me continue the article. The regulations will require that all students receive appropriate supports in accessing all aspects of education. They will strengthen protections for LGBTQI+. Sentinel Square. Students who face discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, they don't do a very good job of defining discrimination in this article that I can see. So leaving it quite broad, and I think they do that on purpose because it opens the door for people to call things discrimination that are not discrimination. They're doing this on purpose. I believe the Biden administration wants this to happen. That way that people can be accused of discrimination that don't agree with the leftist ideology of teaching values that oppose conservative and Christian values in public schools. They want to target those individuals and employees that work in the schools that are conservative, who don't want to abide by some of these rules that this Title IX change is proposing. All right. And they will require that school procedures for complaints of sex discrimination, including sexual violence and other sex-based harassment, are fair to all involved. I do want things to be fair. I want judgments to be fair for anybody. regardless of their background, regardless of their sexual orientation or sexual preference, their gender identity, whatever. In order for it to be fair, though, people in those categories that are not straight, that are not a minority, in order for it to be fair, they shouldn't be getting favors either. They should be getting extra support. They shouldn't be getting less discipline because they should be pitied for being a minority. All right, the proposed regulations also reaffirm the department's core commitment to fundamental fairness for all parties, respect for freedom of speech. Hey, I like respect for freedom of speech. And academic freedom, respect for complainants, autonomy, and clear legal obligations that enable robust enforcement of Title IX. Freedom of speech. Man, I'm glad they mentioned that. Because the proposed regulations would clearly protect students and employees from all forms of sex discrimination, provide full protection from sex-based harassment, protect the right of parents and guardians to support their elementary and secondary school children, require schools to take prompt and effective action to end any sex discrimination in their education programs or activities, to prevent its recurrence and remedy its effects. Protect students and employees who are pregnant or have pregnancy-related conditions. Require schools to respond promptly to all complaints of sex discrimination with a fair and reliable process that includes trained, unbiased decision makers to evaluate the evidence. Problem is, a lot of these so-called unbiased decision makers are people who are already in these school systems and part of this, part of the wokeness. And I know I just keep kind of talking in some broad strokes, but I will be a little more specific. Okay, require schools to provide supportive measures to students and employees affected by conduct that may constitute sex discrimination, including students who have brought complaints or been accused of sex-based harassment. Protect LGBTQI+ students from discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics. This is where some of these proposed changes are straying into contradictory territory. So, it mentioned freedom of speech. Some of these proposed changes, what this would mean for schools across the entire nation, is that if a student or a teacher or any school employee requests that you call them by their preferred pronoun, even though you can objectively see that they are not what you're asking them to call you to call them. These changes would force you to do that by law, which runs very counterintuitive to freedom of speech. Not only freedom of speech, but freedom of religion. Why should anybody be compelled to say something they do not believe or that they don't even want to say? Especially if they are convinced, like I am when I come across a transgender individual, I'm not going to be convinced that it's true. For example, if a woman comes to me asking me to call her Brad Cooper and call her he, they, whatever, mixture, they, them, I'm not going to do that. I will not be obliged. I am not under any requirement to do so for that person, regardless of that person's feelings. Does that sound harsh? It does a little bit. But I think it does more of a disservice. And it's more disrespectful to call somebody by pronouns that are not the pronouns that belong to their biological sex. I'm going to be clear about this. Sex and gender are interchangeable. And just within this article, they kind of conflate the two. So sex and gender are interchangeable. They have been for many, many years. It wasn't just until this whole gender theory crap started exploding the past 30 or so years that people started trying to make them different. We're talking about biological sex. We got males and females. Talking about gender. We got men and women. Blah blah blah. They're interchangeable. And they should always be interchangeable. And people on the right should not be allowing leftists to redefine words all the time. Call them out on it. When they're trying to redefine words, when they're coming and asking you to call them bun self, tell them no. I'll call you what I objectively see you to be. Because anything less, if I'm calling you something that you are not, I am affirming something that is untrue. That would be a lie. I would be, in essence, helping you to live a lie. And I'm not about that. All right, let me continue on. So it would clarify and confirm protection from retaliation for students, employees, and others who exercise their Title IX rights. Improve the adaptability of the regulation's grievance procedure requirements so that all recipients can implement Title IX's promise of non-discrimination fully and fairly in their educational environments. Ensure that schools share their non-discrimination policies with all students, employees, and other participants in their education programs or activities. The department will engage in a separate rulemaking to address Title IX's application to athletics. So basically, what I'm gathering from this, if I'm interpreting some of this wording correctly, these proposed changes are that students and staff in public schools will respectfully not discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation or their status as a transgendered person. I am totally opposed to discrimination. I don't believe favoritism should be shown at all. I don't care what the person's background is. Shouldn't be showing them favoritism. On the flip side, you shouldn't be punishing one person more than unfairly more than another, just because they're different than the other person that's more like you. Totally opposed to that. But something else I'm opposed to is students and staff in our public schools being forced to acknowledge things that oppose their religious and even their political values. The United States Constitution is the law of the land. Nobody should be compelled in their speech especially to violate something that they hold deep down in their heart to be true. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. What about the transgender person's right about what they hold deep down to be true? When a man, let's say 270-pound man, let's say, for example, a teacher decides to come out as transgender and wants to be called Miss So-and-so, Miss Pots and Pans, and wants to be called she, her. He might feel that this is so true that it would hurt him if somebody called him a he or a him. And these changes to Title IX, he would be allowed to sue or get you reprimanded if you misgendered him. That is problematic. Very problematic, because it contradicts freedom of speech. It contradicts freedom of religion. In essence, the federal government is trying to bring about state-sanctioned religion, because they're forcing something that's opposed to people's religious values so much. They're forcing it so hard, and they're wanting to push it. They're wanting to push it so that men and women can use mixed bathrooms. Now, right now, as far as I know, it's just going on with students. But just wait till teachers. Wait till a female teacher wants to use the bathroom with your teenage boys, and wants to be called by a man's name to do it. Such teachers could flip their gender from one day to the next. And these silly, ridiculous changes are trying to tell us that we have to respect that, regardless of how delusional and crazy that sounds. I encourage people to call that stuff out. Stand up against this woke crap. In your workplace, this is happening in people's workplaces too. If you see this stuff coming in your workplace, resist it. Stand up against it. You have a legal right to your freedom of speech, protected by the Constitution of the United States, which is the law of this land. If you can't already tell, I'm sick and tired of the rights of Americans being trampled on. People who've been interacting with me over the past year or so, they know me well enough to know I'm just getting fed up. And I'm speaking out more and more, seems like every single day. The federal government provoked me last year when they mandated the vaccine. So I've been getting more involved. I'm becoming more of an activist. Now, that doesn't have to be a dirty word if the activism that you are taking part in is for the right reasons, is based on Judeo-Christian, Western American, constitutional values. These proposed changes to Title IX in public schools would enforce transgender, mixed-gendered bathroom use. It would enforce people to respect pronouns that were preferred, and of course, it would mix boys and girls on sports teams. So there goes all the previous Title IX protections for women and girls. Erased. Sorry, girls. Biden administration doesn't care to protect you so much as Title IX was intended originally. We see that when people are willing to erase the word woman from their vocabulary. What is a woman? They can't even define it anymore. Judge Ketanji Jackson. What is a woman? Matt Walsh. What is a woman? Did you ever figure that out, man? I haven't watched your movie yet, but I plan to. So, I'm going to wrap it up. I've been rambling long enough. The end of this article from the Department of Ed, it says that is open. Man, I can't talk. It's open for public comment for 60 days from the date of publication in the Federal Register. So I encourage you to comment. Give them an earful, as it were. Call the number that, if it's got that number, give it a call or email, comment. We've got to push back against this stuff, guys, girls, women. We've got to. But you know what? Remember to be bold as lions.